Today on the Idiot's Guide, we are talking about a topic that's really important but often gets swept under the rug: depression. Now, before you run off thinking, man, this is too heavy, I'm out, hold your horses. I promise I'll keep it light. We can talk about mental health and still keep it real without the tissues involved. Hopefully. Depression is something a lot of people struggle with. And the tricky part is it doesn't always show up on a big neon sign. Rather, it's usually hiding in plain sight. So we want to talk about how you can spot it. If someone you care about is dealing with it or going through something, how you can help. And of course, remind you that none of us have to go through this alone. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, aka the Profit Hacker, and I'm joined by the man in charge, Mr. Joe Haslam. Welcome to the Idiot's Guide. So I think one of the things that I want to start out with is just kind of bring up and bring attention or awareness of depression. I don't really necessarily think we need to define depression, because really it's about recognizing what it is, not necessarily that you like this is the clinical definition of what depression looks like. I don't know how helpful that actually would be, but I think understanding some of the signs, some of the symptoms is a better way to be an individual. You're not a doctor, you're not prescribing anything, you're not trying to do any kind of therapy. You are trying to be helpful to yourself or someone else. And I think that that's more about what we're talking about today, is that awareness of what goes on, because this is something that's very unnoticed, very, very, very subtle behavior things that oftentimes get overlooked because they're chalked up to something else. They're chalked up to just, I got stuck in traffic and I'm really sad about it, those sorts of things. And so it just kind of gets disqualified in our everyday stressful lives that are already stressful enough. But I think that depression has some big key flags, big indicators that if you're tuned to it, can be really easily recognized. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think a couple of the big things. We're not therapists. We're just regular guys.
Idiots.
I'm surrounded by idiots.
That's the important part. Is when you need help and you need someone to medication, therapy, all those kinds of things that help you with depression. That's where the doctors come in. The doctors and the therapists and those.
Yeah.
But every day, you see your doctor maybe once a month. You see your therapist maybe once or twice a week if you're lucky. It's the everyday that you're dealing with depression that you don't have those support networks. And a lot of things we're going to be talking about today are how either you as an individual who are around someone who has depression, and how you can help them every single day of their life.
Yeah.
When they're not, that 1 hour once or twice a week with a therapist, that they need that support. And it's those kinds of things where, and even just noticing it, recognizing it in someone that you're around. Because, again, doctors are really good at this, noticing these kinds of things. They have the questionnaires and those kinds of, but people can lie on those questionnaires. Every doctor appointment you go to now, they have the depression questionnaire.
The smiley faces?
Yes.
How do you feel based on these 10 different facial expressions? And you're like, I didn't know there was 10.
Yeah. And so you've got all the questions, but that doctor's not going to see you. It's a one-time thing. They're not going to see you every single day to recognize the issues.
Right.
And so the people...
And different parts of the day, even.
Exactly. And so whether you're the one going through depression, or the people you're around someone who deals with it, or may be dealing with it, these are the important things, that just recognizing what are the signs, what are the symptoms, what can you do about it. That's really important, because you don't have necessarily that access all the time. Now it's getting better.
Right.
More and more emphasis is being placed on mental health.
Well, and I think also there's a lot of resources out there for individuals, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in detail this later. But just resources that are more more accessible. Instead of just this long line to get to a therapist, or a facility like the facilities. Unfortunately, it's still an issue. I don't know how to fix that problem other than just buy a stadium.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about during our MILF series, Man I Love Fireworks, about mental health issues with veterans, and how difficult it can be to get the resources.
Right.
And so it is really an important thing to talk about how, as the everyday person, how you as an everyday idiot in this world can help those around you recognize those things and be able to help it. I was reading some stats earlier today to get ready for this, and the rate of diagnosis, depending on what article you read, is anywhere from 8% upwards to 20% of Americans have been or are diagnosed with depression.
I feel like that statistic is really conservative.
I agree. So the lower numbers were a little bit older data, and more from medical perspectives. So reporting from medical, and those are adults that have it. The 20% was from a Gallup poll, just recently, I think last year. But they only surveyed, I think, 6,000 people, so it's a poll, so it's not 100%, but they do a good job of indicating, and it's who has or may have been.
I mean, that's 1,200 people, so that's out of that, you're talking 2 out of 10 having maybe the qualifier is clinical. So because I think that in our society, especially right now, it's really easy for us to really go like, man, I struggle with depression. But I think there is a distinction that needs to be made where a lot of times the depression comes because of a deficiency in the way we process, our development of serotonin, dopamine, those sorts of our normal brain function that everybody has, where you can plateau, you can hit those highs and lows, or emotional stability and how to stabilize. That when you have depression, oftentimes something is not producing the right way.
Yeah, and there's clinical depression. I think it's called persistent depression, where it is a long-term diagnosis, and then there's episodic, and that's let's say you lose a family member, or a miscarriage,
right.
Or other things like that, where it's not a persistent depression where it's going to last the rest of your life, but it's episodic, where because of that scenario, you are now in that depressive state.
I have depression.
And there you go. Yeah.
It's true. I've had some pretty episodic experiences that I'm like, yeah, I felt pretty terrible in those moments.
Yeah.
But it's the coming back out of those things that some people they struggle with that.
Yeah.
I don't want to say to whatever degree, but it's just that's usually the indicator that would clinically
right.
identify those things.
And all of it's important because we are sensitive creatures.
Yeah.
You look at the human species, and we are very social creatures.
Yeah.
And when anything affects that social mechanism, it leads to very serious issues. And we're not the only ones. I can't remember the fish species, but they are famous for this, I think it's a gourami, but what happens, they are a group or a schooling fish, and a lot of hobbyists will keep them in tanks and things like that. But if one of their group dies, all of the fish in that school actually show symptoms of depression. They eat less, they swim slower, all of these signs, because they actually have that same kind of mechanism that we do.
Isn't it like, I know they're mammals, but like whales and dolphins reflect that as well. Yeah.
So there are a lot of animals that show the same things that we do, and we cannot take this lightly. I think too often we take depression a little too lightly.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not really depressed, you're just sad.
Just rub some dirt on it and get over yourself,
right.
you know.
And that is just such the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
Because it makes it worse.
So what are some things, like I guess to really kind of keep this in a lighthearted tone, identifying depressive behaviors. Let's say, you know, what are common signs of depression? And I think, you know, we have a couple different things that we're going to pinpoint. This is not a definitive list. This is not something that's like, man, these are it. Anything else is disqualified from this. Like, no, like, but one of the first ones I think is a really big, loud indicator is persistent sadness or like a low mood. Just kind of like not really motivated to, you know, like, I would almost say like pessimistic, but in a way that you're like defeated in it.
Yeah.
You know?
And these are uncharacteristic. So if you knew someone who, you know, their whole life they've been a pessimistic person.
They're like a motivational speaker and then all of a sudden they're like, bit.
Right, exactly. It's if they are usually upbeat and then all of a sudden they're not. That's when it comes in. Someone who's a pessimist their whole life and suddenly they're pessimistic, it's probably just them being them.
Right.
These are changes in attitude, changes in the way they view the world. It could be that someone who's constantly pessimistic and all of a sudden they are bright and bubbly, that's a change that you need to actually watch for.
Right.
It's these changes in behavior that's really important. And yeah, that persistent sadness, low mood, just constantly, you know, just... that's what it is. It's just, I mean, if you could look at someone and say, and describe their mood as, that's a good indicator.
How you feeling? It's like when somebody's like meh, you know, like I'm almost meh, whatever, you know. I think the other one is social activities or like hobbies. If you are really, really interested, like I play guitar, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, I'm not interested in playing. I just don't want to do it. I just want to do I want to go hang out with friends? No, I don't want to. I just want to kind of hang out in bed, kind of thing. You're like, okay, something's wrong. Something's up, you know. And, you know, what you said, like a situational depression, basically, I would say is, you know, activated in those moments. But, you know, I've been playing guitar for so long that even, like, something is definitely wrong if I don't want to play guitar, you know, like huge.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's something that as doctors or even as therapists, you may not see that level, but as someone who is involved in someone else's life, you're more likely to catch that.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing. If you're more likely to catch that, then watch for that. And then you can share that information, share with the person, hey, I think maybe you feel a little, you might be a little depressed. And open that subject with them and make sure they're aware of it. And if not, there are a lot of resources where you can alert doctors or therapists about these kinds of issues if you're afraid for someone's life or someone's well-being. But just being involved with someone's life helps you to see a lot of those issues. You know, and it's not just that everyone who doesn't want to be social is depressed. I'm not a social person.
Right.
I don't like the social aspect of things. I'm not going to go to concerts, or I'm not going to actively go out and hang out with people. Not because I'm depressed, it's just because I don't like those kinds of activities.
Well, maybe, I mean, I don't know how this would actually change or transition in this way, but most indicators I don't think are going to run towards crowds ever in that scenario. So even if you're an introvert and the crowds aren't normally like, that change for you to be like, yes, let's go to a concert, you know, you're like,
right.
I don't think that's like a big depression indicator, you know.
Yeah.
There may be something else, maybe another something,
Yeah,
you know, but definitely not this. This is typically like excusing yourself from, you know, societal behaviors.
Yeah.
So
yeah, avoiding any of your hobbies, avoiding any kinds of activities that you would normally do, like work. Trying to avoid work as much as possible, leaving right at a certain time, not engaging with coworkers. It's those kinds of things that generally show signs that there might be something wrong there.
So the other thing is like sleep, appetite, energy levels, those are all different indicators. One of the things I don't want to go too much in detail. Let's say I know someone. Let's say that. But I know someone that was dealing with some depression and had to go on an appetite stimulant because they were starving their feelings, essentially starving those emotions away, and they dropped a whole bunch of weight, lost it all because they're just not eating. And so in that they now they have to take a pill that basically motivates them to be hungry, and they're like ravenously hungry. So I'm like, okay, like that's pill motivated. I've seen the difference when they don't take that pill to see that it also makes them just revert right back to that need for that appetite stimulant. And so it's not always the case, but that's a good indicator. Sleep is another thing where I don't like if I struggle with sleep issues and stuff like that. I stay up too late, get up too early, and can't sleep at night. So it's just all terrible.
Yeah, and that can be sleeping too much or sleeping too little. A lot of people think
you can have
that if you're sleeping a ton, that's a sign of depression. But if you're not sleeping at all, that's not a sign of depression.
Right.
That could be a sign of depression.
Absolutely.
And so,
and also the fact that you have a loss of energy levels in that. Like all of those things are impacting. Even if you feel like you sleep too much, but you still have loss of energy levels, like that means you're sleeping terribly. So all of that's big indicators of just it's the matter of seeing that change, that transition to this. And then I think that one of the last ones we have is difficulty concentrating or making decisions. Like, I don't care, whatever. Yeah, whatever. I'm not going to do that. Or concentrating. I was working on, what was I working on? Like, where did I put I'm holding my phone in my hand and I can't find my phone, just forgetting, kind of space Casey. You have this distance in your mind where you're just kind of off in some sort of kind of seeming like you're stuck in thought. And that might not even be the case. You're just not focused on something.
Yeah. And the reason a lot of these come in is because the brain is functioning differently in a depressive state than they are normally. And so that's where when you're looking at all these indicators, it's the change. And the brain is no longer working the same way it was before. And so understanding and seeing that, knowing that person what they were before, knowing what they are now is really important. That's why it's the everyday person that's going to be able to notice these things first. That's why it's so important that you have friend groups, that you have these social groups, I guess is the only way to say it.
Social structures, support structures. Even if it's a coworker environment,
exactly.
That sometimes is going to be your first indicator because they see you so often.
Yeah.
So they're going to recognize some of these things probably the fastest of who you're around. Unless you have a real tight friend group that you're always with, and as you get older, that doesn't exist. So
that goes away more than
But I think one of the things that's a big thing about depressive behaviors is it's chalked up often as just stress. Like, you're just stressed. Like, just you need a day to relax and you do this. And I think one of the things to really kind of pay attention to is, does it cycle back out? Do you pull out of that? Because if you are, then you may have like a situational depression, but you're able to level back off again, and that's what you're looking for. Is when it kind of just seems like you dipped and you haven't come back, and that's where I have someone that is very, very important to me in my life, and I needed to recognize the moment that happened and go, hey, like we need to look into this because something is not right, and I think like identifying those with loved ones is really, really important, so paying attention to that. It's the patterns and how they it's not a cycle. It's now you're just in a different state of mind.
Yeah.
So, hey guys, our channel is not just about content. It's about connection. It's about educating. It's about helping people. And subscribing to us, joining our community, joining our Patreon is part of like-minded individuals getting together, sharing interests and passions. So we want to grow together. We want to forge meaningful connections along the way. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit a comment. Let us know that you like what we're talking about. If you have suggestions, comment there. Let us know if there's something that you want to hear us talk about. But that's an important part of what we do. It also helps other people learn about us, hear about us. It helps YouTube send that message out to all of the individuals who may not know that we even exist right now. So definitely we want to hear and get some feedback from you. Again, hit that subscribe, hit that like button, and let's grow together. So the second one, I think, part of this is it's okay when you have that situation, when you've identified somebody who's struggling with, how do you approach someone showing those signs of depression? And that kind of takes a dance a little bit. You can't just confront it, because oftentimes you could aggravate the situation.
Yeah, I mean, someone that is depressed or going through some serious issues may feel like they're being judged by having someone approach them or talk to them, or they may feel already socially stigmatized, and by someone talking to them, it makes them feel worse. But neither of those are reasons to not approach it.
Yeah.
So this is someone, if you've noticed these things, then you are obviously enough in their circle that you care about them and they care about you.
Yeah.
And that is the most important thing. Don't ever feel like, oh, I don't know them well enough, or, oh, that's not my place. It is your place. We, as a human species, have a responsibility to each other.
I think it's important to make the distinction between, confrontation and conversation. Yeah. So, like if you want to have some sort of intervention with somebody because they're, abusing a particular substance, that's one thing. But this is where, their brain substance is not firing on all cylinders, essentially. And so you're saying that supportive conversation, you said it right there, is, I care about you. And letting them know is having that kind of empathetic language that says, I've noticed this, I really, I really do care, and I want to make sure you're okay. Those sorts of things go miles in approaching somebody, instead of just going like, man, you're just not pulling your weight. You're like, what's up? Like, what's wrong with you? Yeah. Are you broken? And I hope you never do that. I hope no one ever does that, because you're just kicking them while they're down. But
that's very accusatory language. Not empathetic. But even simply asking, "How are you doing?"
Yeah.
You seem a little off today.
And being like, it's okay to be a little pushy in that, because most people will just be like, meh. Yeah, they're gonna shrug that off.
Social convention is, and I've learned this. Social convention. Is someone asks you, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear the answer is the social convention. But realistically, when you feel like someone doesn't necessarily feel, or they're acting normal, push it. You doing okay?
Yeah.
And then maybe a little while later, you doing okay? You seem a little off. And making it more conversational and less accusatory is, be it part of the conversation, and then they'll eventually open up.
Yeah.
And if you've got that relationship, if you develop the relationship long before they have symptoms of depression, where this is a loved one and you can talk about these kinds of things, it's a lot more easy to actually talk about it. And so if you have that kind of relationship already, then when you start noticing these signs, when you're asking, how are you doing? They're a lot more open to talk to you about it.
Yeah. And I think, avoiding judgmental kind of things, and, it makes me, I think about a scenario, but, offering quick fixes. Yeah. Like, here's what I would do. You know what? So my wife and I, we frequent a bar, okay? And every single time we go to this bar, it is just a place full of toxic behavior and toxic relationship. Like, that's normal, that's natural. Pretty much consistently, I don't know a place that's a bar that isn't that, so it's predictable in that capacity. But you're also able to see the predictable scenarios where you're like, you know what I'd do? I'd just pour myself a shot of this and just drown those sorrows away. And you're like, wow, you're never going to be a good therapist. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even things like, oh, you're feeling down. Oh, you need to exercise more.
Yeah, all you got to do is get out, walk.
All that does,
you know what you can do?
it invalidates that person's feelings by saying your whole problem, the reason that you are so depressed is because you're not walking enough.
And I think the thing
that's
is,
the quick fix.
Immediate advice. Like when you're offering immediate, the best recipe to fix this is not what anybody's looking for. Right now, they're looking for support, and if you've identified this, be support.
Yeah.
It doesn't say, if you're going to tell them what to do, you're just being critical. It's like telling somebody while they're mowing the lawn, they're doing all the work, they're exhausting themselves, and you're like, yeah, hey, that you missed that spot right over there. You're like, make sure the lawnmower is like this, and just like that, like this.
Yeah.
I imagine I'm like micromanaging my kids. I do that, but
Yeah.
I'm in the analogy, it's thinking that I would go nuts if somebody's sitting there going you missed this, you missed that, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. I don't need that. Yeah. Get out of here.
And even something as simple as saying, hey, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
You're not saying anything. You're not accusing them of anything. You're not even giving a quick fix. All you're doing is you're just saying, hey, I'm here for you. You're not even saying, I'm here to talk if you need it. You're just saying, I'm here for you.
Honestly, I learned years ago that I did this in a lesson that I was teaching people about when they were dealing with struggles and stuff like that. And I had been taught that I needed to be this bulletproof, resilient kind of person, and that's the farthest thing from the truth. It's to be empathetic is not bulletproof. You aren't there to shield people. What you're there to do is just, if you don't say a word and you hand them a tissue, and that's it, until they feel comfortable having a conversation with you or telling them what's going on, or telling you what's going on, then that's great. Be there.
Yeah.
Hand a tissue to them. Be like, okay, cool. You okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. And I think it's a lost element in a lot of people's conversation, because we're like, you know what I would do? Yeah. I'd pour myself just,
yeah.
That's the thing,
Yeah, and there's not to go into the topic of toxic masculinity, but this is a big deal for men.
Absolutely.
An inability or an unwillingness to talk about it because you're not allowed. You have to be the rock. You're the strong one. If you have emotions, you are not man. And it's that idea no, guys have emotions. Guys cry. It's okay. We all have emotions.
Right.
And the abandonment of those emotions or the ignoring of those emotions leads to worsening depression problems.
Yeah.
And so it's important that you are open about it and recognize that, yeah, you got that. And I can guarantee you, any guy out there that wants to challenge us on our masculinity,
I am a manly man.
Yes.
No. What?
We are manly men.
Okay.
But at the same time, we are both willing to cry.
Yeah. I mean, I've had I'm definitely not gonna tear up on a rom-com, but but maybe if it's something good, something, what really messes me up, honestly, when I see really cool things that kids do, really epic, just pure talent, and they don't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be neat. It's just something that's so creative out of a little kid. I'm just like, oh, I'm done. You know, like, it's so cool to me. It's inspiring to see that that's the, that's the thing that I really enjoy and it, like, I get all freaking choked up about.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, yeah. So
being masculine doesn't mean you avoid the topics of depression or you avoid your emotions or anything like that. Being a man, being a real man, is recognizing those things,
right,
and being willing to talk about it, because that's the hard part.
Yeah,
that's real humanity.
Not to mention the fact that our society, with that kind of stigma against depression, makes it even more harmful and potentially life-threatening. Essentially, in our culture and our society, about you talk about toxic masculinity and the idea that it's wrong for you to not be the manly man. You're like, no, that's not true. Like, I could be a manly man and I still have emotions.
Right.
And that's an important aspect, because if I want to communicate with my loved ones, I don't want to do it like I'm wrestling a bear. Right. I can,
Yeah.
but I don't. That's not a necessary application in pretty much any setting out there.
Yeah.
So it's better to have that empathetic kind of thing, and I think the recognition to anybody struggling with, depression, or we identify somebody who we love or we care about that is dealing with depression, is acknowledging they are not alone and you are not alone. So it's both and in that sense, but most importantly, through the entire process, be patient with the process. If somebody, you say, hey, I've noticed this, but they might be rejecting at the very beginning of that, and you're just trying to come with some compassion and some empathy and saying, like, man, I really care about you. They may not open up. They may not be ready to have that conversation or even acknowledge that that's what's happening. It doesn't mean run away or even back off. It just means that, like, for a minute, continue to just stand there. You're not offering a quick fix. You're not immediately offering advice. You're just being present so that they know that they aren't dealing with us alone.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can't say anything better.
Speaking of not alone, man, like, we've got something that makes you part of our family right away, actually. Patreon.com/TIG_HPF. I know that was really long. Don't worry, it'll be across the bottom of the screen when we talk about this, but we have a Patreon account. And there's lots of different options about how you can subscribe, at what tier you can subscribe to, and sign up on our Patreon. Each one of those comes with little perks. You can just be a spud, or you can be a mashed tater. I can't remember what's the commentator.
There's your commentator. Yeah. There's the spectator.
So if you because of the, I'm going to clarify this. What it has to do, the HPF stands for Hot Potato Finance. That's our channel. Obviously, if you follow us on YouTube, you'd know that. But if you listen to the podcast anywhere else, you probably don't know that. Hot Potato Finance is our theme, so potatoes are our game. And that's what we like to do, so everything's kind of potato themed. We're going to get potato pillows. I was shopping for them before we started recording. Yeah, I think you're going to get a potato shirt, aren't you?
Yep, I'm going to get a potato shirt for our Hot Potato Finance videos. So. Yeah, and those should be coming soon. So keep a watch on the channel. We've got some good script writers. We've got a good editing team now. So we're getting going on those. If you watched our podcast on toxic perfectionism, you know why it's taken so long to get any of those videos done.
So patreon.com/TIG_HPF. Sign up for your favorite category, and we will hook you up with all sorts of fun stuff. Thank you, guys. Last thing I want to do is talk about, offering support. So now that we've identified, now we've kind of confronted this situation here. I guess confronted isn't the supported conversation, acknowledged. How do we help somebody? How do we offer, good help, ways to help somebody, who is depressed? So I think the first one is encourage them to find support. So whether that's a group conversation sort of a thing, whether that is therapist of some capacity, whether that's treatment in certain places, it really depends on the level. You are not the person to determine that, but pointing them in the direction of maybe that, or even helping them find somebody that can be that for them is something you absolutely can do.
Yeah, and there are some really great resources that you can go to. So there's a great website called Psychology Today. So it is basically the Amazon of therapists. I don't know how else to explain it, but therapists go on there, they put their profiles.
Is it same day shipping?
No. So maybe it's not the Amazon of therapists. Therapists will go on, they will put their profile picture, they will put their profile.
I'm a Psychology Today Prime member, actually.
Sorry. Wow, this is going off the rails quick. They'll put what insurances they take, what their fees are, all those kinds of things. So if you're looking for a therapist, you can go on Psychology Today. They are not a sponsor. They're just someone that I have used when trying to find therapists. And it'll show what topics they cover, what age ranges they'll work with, and you can filter all that for your region, how far from your zip code, all those kinds of things to find a therapist in your area that works for you. Additionally, forward them to a primary care provider.
Yeah.
Doctors are great to be able to provide this kind of help and support, as well as they have a lot of resources to be able to then share with the individual to others. If you aren't up to any of those, there are other resources. So BetterHelp is another one. They are not a sponsor. There's a lot of controversy around BetterHelp as to their business practices, things like that. I've done some research into them. I'm not going to say that they're necessarily the best or the worst, but honestly, any port in a storm. Yeah. If BetterHelp helps someone, then great.
Absolutely.
If it means they have access to a therapist because they're going through something, I'm all for it.
Well, and then also just simply, mindfulness things, different things for mindfulness. There's one that I use. It's an app called Declutter the Mind, and it's really basic. There's nothing fancy about it. It's literally just a silent, white noise filtered sound, but then somebody come in and kind of briefly coach you through a list of all sorts of issues that you're dealing with. I'm dealing with a panic attack. It doesn't have airy, solarium kind of sounds, no eucalyptus smells. It is just straight up no noise. And then somebody comes in softly and says, all right, what I want you to do is do this. All right, what I want you to do. And the whole goal behind that is to level you back off again. So maybe it's not a clinical level that might require that, but these are different options that are there to kind of help just overall your well-being mentally is the goal with that. And but encouraging people to be able to do that is an important part of that. The other thing is maybe just offering to help some things. Maybe their sink is full of dishes and you want to help do some dishes for them, or just reduce a little bit of that potential stress of oh man, my house is a mess. I think we talked about it in an episode a while back where we talked about maybe starting a cleaning service that was as a therapy, if you're having somebody who's dealing with this sort of thing, there's a service that comes in and does an entire house cleaning. I wish that was something you could bill to an insurance policy.
Yeah, it should.
That would be genius, honestly. If you could, I don't know what the difference between that and medical care in general is.
It makes a huge difference. I'm going to share a quick story. I know we're kind of long on the episode today, but years ago I was a church missionary and I was in an area and walking through, I think it was a park or something, and met a lady there, and she was suffering from very major depression. And when she started having the episodes, one of the first things that happened was she stopped cleaning. And then when she stopped cleaning, the house became more cluttered. And that caused more depression because now it was an insurmountable task. And that caused her to clean even less and even less and even less. And it had been, I'm not sure even how long, but probably about 3 to 6 months of this absolutely no cleaning. And it was to the point where now her landlord was kicking her out if she didn't clean it up. It was that bad. And so I rallied some other church missionaries in the area, and there were about, I think, 10 or 12 of us. And for 2 or 3 days straight, we cleaned out this unit. And I think it was like a 3-bedroom apartment condo thing. And it was so bad. It was so bad. But it's because of the depression.
Yeah.
But cleaning all that clutter out, she kept her house, and she started to feel so much better. And it was a huge improvement on her. I moved shortly after that, so I didn't get to see how things progressed from there. But even something as simple as that, cleaning the house, makes a huge difference on someone who feels this insurmountable ability to get back on top. And just simple tasks, making a meal, just whatever it is, make their life a little bit easier.
Yeah, totally. And I think, one of the last things about that would be, again, none of this is definitive. This isn't like the only options that you can do. These are just good suggestions, but being consistent with it. So if, let's say you recognize that somebody needs that extra, like taking care of a couple things, encouragement for a moment, whether that's momentary or whether that's long-term care for something, I think it's important to be consistent with it. And that means hey, like a couple times a week, I'm going to be, this day and this day, I want to make sure that I actually intentionally check in with somebody. But not be overbearing where you're like, you didn't call me back, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. Like, I sent you a text message and I didn't hear a reply, so I called the paramedics and they'll be there in 10 minutes. That's panic attack, central. Yeah. But the reality is like, I had a friend that if I didn't do that, I wouldn't know where they were. And it got to a point where I had, we were dealing with some certain things with him that I still, actually, I don't think I do anymore, but like maps, Google Maps, like we shared locations. So that I knew when I was checking in, like it was a conversation I had with him before that I was like, hey bro, like, are you okay with me like just having this access so I know where you're at? Because randomly he would drive to, out of state, like just all of a sudden take off. And we're like, you can't do that. That's not a good thing.
Yeah. And
so I'm not saying that you're that case. That was a situation that merited that sort of thing, but it was the check-ins. I was always making sure that I was consistent with him, up to a point where there was a moment he was low enough to where it was daily. We were connecting, but it was always in the sense of going, man, I'm going to turn the pressure on only as much as you want. I'm not going to be something where you're like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to keep you to this routine, and that's it. You don't have a choice. That's not what it is. But knowing that there's all of these services, there's all sorts of things that you can do that don't cost any money. Go over and help them make a meal, whatever it is. Be consistent with people, and the different communities, online, mental health apps, all those sorts of things. And I think, the important thing is that, the person who's doing that, there's a tax to that as well. And knowing that, you're committing to helping somebody and being supportive to somebody else is, don't don't let that be something that brings you down with them, because commiserating is not a healthy direction. But it is something to know that, like, there is support. That support also applies to you. That there are support groups and that help that. You know, I think about AA and Al-Anon. You know, those are two, you know, different kinds of support groups, but are support groups for those specific scenarios. Now, I know that's not depression, but it's an aspect of the abuse that can, you know, lead to depression because of it. So, you know, those are there's all sorts of different communities and groups that can be there to help kind of process and verbally process things.
I always equate it to mountain climbing. So if you are climbing up the side of a mountain and you've got someone below you that you're trying to help bring to the top of the mountain with you, you have to be on solid footing.
Yeah.
You have to be in a good spot to help them up. You can't push them up the side of the mountain. You have to lift them up the side of that mountain. And you have to maintain your footing all along the way.
Yeah.
And so if you slip, then catch yourself. Make sure you've got good footing. Because, I mean, mountain climbing's hard.
Yeah.
And so make sure that you've got that good foothold so that you can help the next person up. And so that self-care is really, really important. And we're all in this together to get to the top of that mountain.
Yeah. You know, being aware of depressive behaviors and supporting others, that's kind of the first step that we talked about today. The other thing is, you know, take action. Take action, but when you take action, do it empathetically. Do it with compassion for an individual, looking and recognizing those signs that you may see in your loved ones, in like helping in individuals to recognize some of those things in themselves, so that, you know, they can then, you know, kind of pass that, or, you know, pass on information, like helpful things, going to see a therapist, you know, maybe joining a support group, you know, allowing their friends to be supportive in that process as they're dealing with particular things. But then the other side of it is knowing that you yourself, you also have that support available, and that recovery is absolutely possible with that. So, anything else you want to add at the tail end of that?
Just don't stigmatize it.
Yeah.
You know, everyone goes through this.
Yep.
Everyone does. And just recognize that we all need help. We're all part of the same human family. And help support everyone. Because when you support someone else, when you go through it, they'll be there to support you. That's what it's all about, is it's a community of people. And we can't stigmatize these ideas of, oh, they're weak because they're depressed. Absolutely not.
Right.
We are all in this together. We have our strengths, we have our weaknesses, and we only thrive when we support and build with everyone else.
Well, I think that's a wrap.
I think so. Now, to keep it on a little bit of a lighthearted note, we are adding a new feature to our podcast.
Oh, yes.
All right.
You're right.
So we are now going to be doing dad jokes.
Dad jokes.
All right. So I've got a dad joke
new
for
segment.
you. When does a cucumber become a pickle?
Oh, man. I don't know.
When it goes through a jarring experience.
Oh, that joke's a big deal. Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going for double dad jokes this week.
All right, guys. We have reached the end of our show. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Life's too short. So keep laughing and learning. And remember, idiots have way more fun.